The time is 2 o'clock. We'll call this Facility Planning Committee to order. First item for discussion is Mark Twain repurpose. According to Policy FC, we already released the impact analysis. Much of the information has already been talked about. But for clarification, Ms. Bethany Clark will talk about some of the details and discuss boundaries.
Good afternoon. A short person. So last time I presented with you some mock boundary draw-ups of Mark Twain. And so today I'm going to go over, there were some questions about what that's going to do to class sizes, how is that going to impact staffing, and how many kids are actually going into each grade. So you have received this handout, and this will break it down per building using those boundaries that I presented. So you can see at Carden Park, they already have 4 sections of every grade, but 5th and 6th grade. We would add 2 students to kindergarten. Now I'm going to preface kindergarten with we don't really know because we don't have kindergarten enrollment, so we used our current kindergarten and assumed we would get about the same number of kids. And then we rolled every grade up. So that number of first grade students is our actual current number of Carden Park students. These are some highly mobile buildings, so we do know that students are going to move in and students are going to move out, but they do typically move in and move out at about the same rate. So it doesn't fluctuate by 10 or 15 students. It's usually, here I'm predicting we'd add 2 students, but we might add 4. So you can see Carden Park's section sizes are going to stay roughly about the same. We will have to add a section of 2nd grade because we'll have 3 students move in. They're already at 24, which would put them at a fairly large number. So if we did 5 sections, it would drop them down to 19. And then we would go ahead and add a section of 5th and 6th grade because they are also kind of large at 24 and 23. And that would drop those sections down to under 20. Coleman, we expected around 50 students to be moving in. As you can see, Coleman's impact would need to add a section of 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 5th, which would give them about 3 sections at each grade with the exception of 6th grade. Also keeping those class sizes at around under 24, right around that 20 range. Edison is the building in which it's going to impact us staffing-wise the most. I know that's the building that has the most concerns. As you can see, we would add sections of kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 6th grade, giving them 3 sections at every grade with the exception of 3rd and 5th. It would reduce their class sizes down to under 20 with the exception of 3rd grade and 4th grade. 21 in 4th grade is a really good class size in the district. It would put us at 23, 24 in 3rd grade, which is an area that we would watch really, really closely for next year. It's not unreasonably high for our district. These are actually really, really low class sizes, but it is a little bit higher for a building that's going to absorb about 90 students. And then you can look at Parkway. Again, Parkway's numbers in the lower grades, kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd, are going to go up to about 20, 21, which is pretty common in the district. They are actually really small right now at 17, so absorbing some of these students will take a burden off of some of our kindergarten class sizes that are kind of large. And then the last building you can look at is Scaife. Scaife is also a building that has rather small class sizes. So when they will get the majority of our students at 97, you can again see that their class sizes are going to go up just a little bit in those younger grades to become more level with where the district stands. But in those upper grades, they will go down because we will be making them a 3-section building.
So one thing that I would add in regards to that is that we did identify every single student that's leaving Mark Twain, and so we know exactly how many students are going into ESOL students are going to each building, special education students going to each building, the behavior issues that's going to each building. And so we're watching that closely, make sure that the supports will be there. It actually fell pretty good, to be honest with you. I was kind of surprised because we do have high ELD populations in certain buildings, and we wanted to make sure that we didn't overpopulate that, and it fell in a pretty good spot. So those things have been identified. I've met 3 separate times with each individual principal that is involved to talk about what their needs are. And I met with the staff, 2 staff members from every building that's involved. And that meeting went quite well. Actually, the staff was very informative. Dr. McGinnis and I sat in on that meeting, and we learned some things. And so I think throughout the process, that's what we want to make sure that we're, protecting the students that are moving, but also protecting the students that are currently in these buildings as well. And so there's going to be a lot of things. We're not going to stop meeting. That's going to be something that will take place all the way up to the start of school and even after that, to follow up to make sure everything is going well. But there's a series of events that the teachers had brought up, about making students feel welcome, so having like a welcome day. So if the students are going to go to Mark Twain or go to Skaith, we'll send them over for a day, where they can kind of introduce themselves with the other students. And so those things are in the works. Those talks are happening because, empathy is a big part of it. You want to make sure that we're protecting everything that's happened. And if anybody has any other ideas on things that we can do, because I'll just be honest with you, they talked about pressure from the lunch line, as you add 90 kids to a building. That's something that we really didn't think about. But so the teachers have provided information to us on what's going to happen. And you'll see some, I know equity is a lot of conversation. There's a lot of conversation around equity. And the next 2 presentations will kind of talk about the equity piece. Those are for discussion only. And it's not anything set in stone, but we wanted to get out in front of it and just let you guys listen to it. So I guess at this time we would entertain any questions that the committee has in regards to the presentation that Ms. Clark just.
So we happen to have
Go ahead.
Another sheet of the breakdown.
The
So
impact analysis?
I'm missing. Oh,
We'll get it.
What were the resources that the principal asked for?
Extra counseling. And actually, we had a counselor that was, and you'll have to help me with this, Bethany and Ashley. So we had a counselor at Mark Twain. That counselor will be going to Skaith. And Elizabeth's shaking her head, so I said that right? And her target goal is about 400 students on the counselors. And so that number was going to go over 400, so we felt like that there would need to be 2. ELD support or ESOL support. And one thing that we're talking about is the distribution of title funds. I think that in the past what we've done is just kind of carry over the title funds, and we always use those title funds for the same thing that we used them for in 1997. And so we met last week, and we're trying to make sure that those title funds are distributed properly. And we have a meeting scheduled with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education on March 2nd. It's a conference call with all of us to make sure that we can spend those monies on what we can. Because as you guys know, early childhood education now, you've probably seen legislatively, has an opportunity for ADA funding, which ADA funding wasn't anything that could happen before. So right now, all of our preschools, not all of them, but a lot of our preschool classes are funded by Title I education. So if we can use ADA funding for those, that'll free up some title dollars that we can distribute other places to provide those resources. So I don't know, do you guys want to elaborate on what other resources? I know that there's an intern, administrative intern, that will be added between Edison and Coleman, and it'll be 60/40, so it'll be 3 days a week at Edison and 2 days a week at Coleman.
There's already an intern there at Edison and Coleman. We'll add an
Oh, wait.
administrative intern between Skaith and Parkway.
Skaith and Parkway, my fault.
As I said last time, I'm concerned about the transition, and it's good to hear that there is a lot of talk about things that we can do. And I just kind of put some things down, 312 students at Mark Twain using the formula funding per students equals $1.98 million. And then the other students, or the schools they're going to, is 1,929 students, which represents about $12.3 million. From a business kind of, if we were going to move that much product in a business to another area, we would want to make sure that we do the necessary things for that product to be good and successful. And I just want to encourage the board and the administration to realize that money we spent in preparation of this and ahead of time, I think is going to save us so much money on the back end, to where I believe the closing of schools in the past, and we lost so much money on that by not accommodating, welcoming, and taking the steps, I think, to fully integrate those students into the new schools. And I believe that we should, for the short term, I think there should be one person whose entire job is to field questions from parents, from staff members at these schools, from administration, to be a liaison between each other there and to the board and to the administration, and more of an advocate for all of these students. I just believe this can't be added to somebody's plate
Yeah.
to check up on every once in a while. I think that it is so important to welcome these students any way we can with, like you said, the field day or whatever going over there. I mean, heck, we could have it come up with, have a draft, have shirts made up, have signs made up, make it an event, because I always think that we need to remember, what is it like to be in the third grade? And just some sort of acknowledgement that you're wanted somewhere else, I think is huge. And if you want to go back and look at the attendance data, at the achievement data from those students that transferred from, let's say, Humboldt to the other schools, to Lake, to Hosea, I think you can see that there was a drop-off in attendance and a drop-off in achievement. And I just want to make sure that we're putting every resource we can. And this represents a major part of our budget and our year. I think we've got to do more than just draw them up, tell people here's where you go, and hope for the best.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, that meeting with the teachers was about an hour and 20 minutes long, and I would say 45 to 50 minutes was spent on just the stuff that you're talking about.
That's great.
And every teacher that was there that day was either at Humboldt or at Lindbergh at the time, or at Lake, or at Hosea at the time. And so they come from Edison, they come from Parkway, they come from Carden Park, but they were involved in this process. So they were there. I figure we should reach out to the people that dealt with it, right? And so they told me what went wrong, for sure. So they identified that. We know what went wrong, and we're going to try to stay ahead of the game, be proactive.
I still think we're absorbing the costs of that as those youngsters are now in middle school and high school.
Absolutely, because look at the attendance rates, the way they were driven down from a
and
negative
I
standpoint.
bet you could find a direct correlation between those students and other students,
Yeah.
about how there is similarities.
That's a good point. What do you think about maybe identifying the students that are in transition and maybe tracking them for the next 12 to 24 months?
Absolutely. I mean, there should be somebody that's checking up on them, calling them 2 weeks into school, a month into school, checking grades at the end of first quarter. I mean, it should be somebody's primary focus. Like I said, if you really look at the numbers, you spend a little money, and I think you save a lot in just attendance alone, let alone achievement.
Are you proposing a new job position or change a person's job who's already on staff?
I don't know what would be best, but I think you need someone that can focus on that.
Well, it might be the thick or.
At least for a little while.
It'd be like a 1 year,
Yeah.
maybe into a second year, see how it goes. But I would just like to be ahead of the game instead of a year down the road looking back on what we could have done better. I think that you can address a lot of these problems immediately.
Don't we have a lot of counseling already now in the schools? I mean, not as much as we need.
I mean,
Yeah, but they're.
You just said, what, 400 kids per counselor? I mean,
That's not good. I mean, that's not ideal.
Yeah, they
No,
they
we don't have
any
enough
extra
counseling.
time.
I just think this is going to create an entirely
The tracking version.
specific set of problems, and I think that it's going to be common between the schools. So to have one, if you had each counselor or each person in the school, one that's throwing a lot on their plate, but then you've got 6 people, 8 people, whatever, where I think it'd be good to have one point person that got after this.
I think even one person, it could be overwhelming for,
Yeah.
but at least it's a start.
It's better than how many people we had when we closed buildings last time. That was kind of my thought.
Any other questions or comments?
So
Well, Jeff,
staff-wise, go
at
ahead.
the-
Go ahead.
Sorry, go
No, yeah.
ahead. At the academics meeting, we talk about student achievements and academics, so that's something that we can add. And then we have an MSIP6 meeting, so we go through a bunch of data. We could include that into those meetings and make it a priority so we can talk about them every month. So instead of hiring somebody new to solely focus on that, is we can add it to the committee and then add it to what Kendra is already doing.
Who's somebody going to call when they got a problem at 6 o'clock?
I don't want to put,
I-
you
I'm
know,
not sure
more
that
on her
she-
plate, but.
My opinion is, I think she's more analytical, and she's gonna present data. I don't know if she could be as hands-on to address the problems as they arise.
I think you need somebody that can meet with people, can go into different schools, report back to Kendra, report back to the board. How would you treat $14 million? Would you just send it down the road and hope for the best, or would you keep an eye on it pretty close?
Yeah.
I guess that's the way I'm looking at it and trying to give a different perspective.
And I'll be honest with you, we have positions now with I think it would be easy to create something like that in a short term, or not a short term, but to track that information, because we have interventionists, attendance interventionists, and that's the kind of stuff that you're going to be checking on, right? Those are the kind of job duties that this person's going to be doing.
Yeah, but you can't have a minimum wage job doing
No, I agree.
But like the.
Yeah,
Like the family
I was talking about
involvement
the job
coordinators.
description.
Yeah, I was just wanting to make sure that was kind
Like
of.
your family involvement coordinators
Yeah.
in some of the title schools.
We have, just a
So-
pet peeve, we have attendance interventionists that are making less than the high school kids they're trying to get to show up to school every day. So,
True.
So the resources, there's a lot of staffing
Yeah.
requirements. You see Dr. Kraus is in the back. I'm really worried about the staffing and the time that it's taking to get people onboarded. We're talking a lot about support staff, and largely that's gonna come from the parent base that you already have. It's difficult for the families that you're gonna be recruiting for subs and paras and BIs and attendance interventionists to get online and scan their documents and upload their documents and check back in electronically. That's gonna be really difficult for them. So I guess the only kind of, just words of wisdom would be, there's gonna have to be I believe there's gonna have to be a different strategy to recruitment for these positions.
And we talk about it all the time, and we're actually changing our onboarding strategies a little bit. We're trying to recruit outside the country. I can't sit here and promise you that staffing's not going to be an issue, because it's an issue nationwide. But I can I can tell you that those conversations are taking place, and we're trying, I mean, we just talked about it, 45 minutes
Well,
ago.
I don't think that, the workforce and the way the climate has changed around hiring is very different because of COVID and those types of things. But if anybody, I'm gonna get hammered for this, but if somebody has to go understaffed, it needs to be Field. It needs to be Pershing. It needs to be Oak Grove. It cannot be Edison. It cannot be Lindbergh. They need as much support as they're able to get.
And let me tell you, that was a topic of conversation as well. And we used to, where you would apply for a teaching position in St. Joseph School District, and then it would be a draft. We talked about going back to that. So Edison doesn't get, the short end, that Carden Park doesn't get the short end. And we probably just need to ramp up that conversation. But some of the administration was around when that happened, and they spoke highly of it,
And if
right?
you could just stabilize them even just for a year, just give the teacher, I mean, they're just like survive in advance at this point. Like we're not setting them up to be successful. So I think if we can just really amp up supports for them for the next year, that's gonna be huge.
Good ideas. Any other questions or comments?
I have supports that don't require them to fill out another form to send to this person and send to that person,
Reduce the
It is so
bureaucracy.
different, yeah, than whacking dinosaur days when
Yeah,
I
right.
was starting out. They just add to all that, some of that can just add to the, I'm
Yeah,
overwhelmed.
for sure.
Yeah, personally, I'm not opposed to Mr. Leake's idea. If it's not a person or maybe an ongoing ad hoc committee or something that will see this thing through, so to speak, I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
I don't think like an ad hoc will work. I think a person needs actual income in order to do this correctly. I like your idea. I think it's amazing.
I'm not sure it should be a one-person thing either. Sometimes when you work together, you can, feed off each other, and, you still have your guidelines, but, I don't know.
But you're just talking to head it up is a one-person deal, and
Right.
that job committee is that.
I want you to pay special attention to this copy here. It says elementary estimated financial impact with redistribution to Mark Twain. I'm not sure what happened here, but these numbers changed from this morning. When we met this morning, they were right. So I want to make clarification to that. The numbers on the right side, so your 17 classroom teachers should be $1,020,000, not $900,000. I think it must have filtered through there where we have the 15. And then the one administrative intern is $75,000, not $180,000. So I guess you can see the correlation. It looks like those. And then the two counselors is $120,000, not $35,000. And the total is $1.215 million, not $105,000.
Can you say the total again?
Yeah, 1.215.
Thank you. I thought I was some kind of really scientific formula here.
Apologize. And we looked at it this morning at 8 o'clock. We went through everything, and so I don't know what happened.
Yeah, I looked at it again this afternoon and
I just looked at it and I was like, Gabe, look at this.
Apologize for that.
Okay, if nothing else, item 2, Coleman Elementary discussion.
Okay. I'll have Bethany once again talk about the boundaries from Coleman, but we've had a lot of discussions, and just please understand, this is a discussion, okay? This is not anything that we're presenting and voting on. We just want to gather some feedback, really, is what we're looking for today. But, so, you, as Ms. Lanning just talked about, if you're going to put more pressure on other buildings, we need to put pressure on Field, we need to put pressure on Pershing, we need to put pressure in other places. So I think this is an opportunity where we can relieve some pressure from some of these buildings. So what's going to be presented to you today, we have 51 students, I believe, that we're going to go to Coleman from Mark Twain. And we can draw the boundaries out to where we can relieve 42 of those students to Field Elementary, which is an elementary school that's undersized, class sizes are small, and it changes the equity. You know, it changes the diversity of the building, it changes equity. It helps the student population. It's good for kids. One thing I think we have to keep in the back of our minds and make sure we're cognizant of is that we don't want these students, as we talk about boundaries next, and talk about feeder programs, and talk about middle school restructuring, we want to make sure that these students aren't affected twice, where we make the change this year and then we turn around and make the change the following year. So we have to keep that in the back of our mind as we discuss this. So what happens if we just leave the number of students in Coleman that come from Mark Twain? Then we probably have to look at adding a counselor because they're going to be over 400 kids. So that's an additional expense. We thought it was kind of a seamless transition from Coleman to Eugene Field. So I'm going to let Bethany present that information, but I just wanted to allude to that before we got going.
So you can kind of see on the back of this form, it gives you a boundary map. And it goes down Ashland to Northwest Parkway to Corby Parkway to 22nd Street and then to Frederick. And so you can kind of see the northwest portion of the Coleman boundary. Is where I gather there's about 42 students in that area. There's a few more, a couple of them go virtual, so I tried to just get the number of students that would attend school. So you can see the new boundaries, Ashland to Northwest Parkway to Corby Parkway to 22nd Street to Frederick, and that northwest portion would transfer to Field. And then I went ahead and did the class size distribution so that you can see Field does have smaller class sizes. They have about 100 empty seats. So pushing 40 kids in there would not require us to really hire or add any additional sections to that building. It would drive some class sizes up, particularly in 3rd and 5th grade. But for the most part, it would keep their class sizes in a reasonable fashion. And it would also kind of reduce, it would continue to just reduce class sizes at Coleman. It would keep them under 400. It would be pushing in and then taking out roughly around the same. I think they'd have about 10 additional students. So just kind of something to think about there. Anybody have any questions? Something I can look at.
Is 28 kids in a class too large?
It is under the standard. In a non-title building, it wouldn't be. So if you look at Pershing, Ellison, Oak Grove, in those upper 4th, 5th, and 6th grade classes, they do often have over 25 kids because my priority has always been to keep title class sizes smaller. If something has to give, that's where I give it. It's usually to our more at-risk students. So 28 would not be out of line for Field.
Are any kids moving over needing any supports? Are there any IEPs, things like that?
There will be some students with IEPs, and there will be some students that would have English as a second language. And those are things we would work through student services, special services, to make sure that we provide the right services for them.
So I might, I hate to put them on the spot, but I might have DLO or Kara kind of allude to that, because the number of special education students is not going to change. And so it's not like we have 4 special education teachers here, 3 here, 2 here, 9 here, 12 here. We change, that's an ever-changing thing. So that's a day-changing thing. So we move people. So do you guys want to kind of touch base on that?
Sure. So we keep track and we look every month at all the caseload, where basically our process consultants and special education teachers put in their caseload of students, and then we look at staffing to ensure that we are staffing appropriately. So it's not uncommon for us to have to hire staff all the time. Paras, teachers, we move people around. Same thing for, I haven't had the opportunity with ELD to move as much in the middle of the year. The beginning of the year, we always look at our caseloads and move staff appropriately.
They have a little board that looks like they're playing checkers.
Yeah, stop in.
Seriously, it's got the
That is,
names up
sir.
on there.
Yeah.
He caught us in there today studying it. So it is constantly changing.
And you're able to move them around as kids move around in the district and things?
Okay. When you go into special education and also into ELD, that has, I mean, unfortunately, teachers do know that they have to move at times due to caseloads. But it's no different than a classroom teacher has to move sometimes, and I had to move as a teacher because a section was changed and such, but it just does happen more frequently in our field.
Thank you.
The only thing that might be different is if that child from Coleman was receiving support for reading intervention, they may not have enough support at Field.
So Field has a part-time reading interventionist, and when you look at the number of kids that go there and a part-time reading interventionist, those students receive quite a bit of, I mean,
Good.
they have some pretty good support there, just because the building is small. So I don't foresee, I mean, yes, it would be a concern, but they still have access to an interventionist should they
Good,
need it.
good, because I know they don't have near what title schools
They
do.
don't,
Yeah.
don't.
Okay.
Absolutely, and that's something that, if this is something we want to pursue, then Field needs to be involved in those conversations moving forward, the conversations that we're talking about having every other week with the principals and the teachers and those types of things. This one, to be honest with you, is a lot more, I mean, I think this is seamless. I think this is something that can be done if the board so chooses to look at it. But we wanted to get the information out there because we figured that the least amount of disruption that you can cause, if we're going to cause disruption, let's cause disruption in 22-23. Let's not continue to cause disruption for this reason, something that could be fixed today, next time.
I was going to point out on this document, if you want to see right here, under each class size, it gives you the DESE standard. So the first number is the desired, so it's like the lowest number what DESE would like, and then the last number is the standard. So that's what DESE says can be in a classroom without additional support. That doesn't mean that you can't have 28 or 30 kindergartners in a classroom. It just means that we ought to be, at that point in time, we need to be looking at providing some additional para support, some class size reduction, those types of things. You will see I tend to keep things way lower than that.
Do you look at bus routes when you do this, or does that come after?
It'll come after. It'll come after.
Minimal impact,
Yeah, they're still in the same area. I'll be honest with you, our concern is more going to be, from a transportation standpoint, it's going to be on the students that will be coming to Mark Twain rather than the students that will be leaving Mark Twain. So your early learning routes is where we're really going to have to make some decisions on the transportation issue. But we've already met with, I guess it's first student now, but our ALPA representative. We've had conversations with Mark Alexander, and those types of conversations are taking place as well. It'll be a challenge, but it's not impossible. And that was something that the teachers brought up too. When they, in the meeting with them, they were like, you really need to make sure that you stay ahead of the game from a transportation standpoint because it can really blow up. And we're kind of in a good position because their contract is up. And so we're in a position to where we can kind of control those conversations a little bit more.
Do they normally do the routes like July or early August, or? I know it's normally kind of late, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in August. You have to wait till all the registrations are done, and you don't want to have to keep changing them every single day. They have kind of a cutoff date, and then we give them 10 days, and then they have to have it to us.
Would it be?
When they present the routes, do they let you know how much or how long the students are going to be in the bus from, a certain location?
Yes, and that presents a challenge too, from an early learning standpoint with the current facility that we have at Lake. But I'll be honest with you, the ride time is not always what is presented, because the ride time is pretty easy for us to predict. What is hard for us to predict is how long it takes us to get the students on the bus in the seat and strapped in, and that changes. And so parents will be concerned, well, my student was on the bus for an hour and 5 minutes. Well, really, your student wasn't on the bus for an hour and 5 minutes. It took us 40 minutes to get everybody situated. And we're better at that, right? I mean,
It's not going to take that long, is it?
No.
Would we be better off?
45 minutes is the longest, that's what we say, that you would ever be on the bus. And most of them aren't on the bus for 45 minutes. Most of them are 15 to 20.
With our early childhood, has it ever been explored to have those students, or some go to bus routes to the local elementary school and have one bus go school to school, that, in case they would ride with siblings or things like that? I don't know I just didn't know if that's ever been explored, instead of having one bus kind of going.
Yeah, it hasn't, but I mean, that's something that we tried to have bus stops for early learning, and that didn't work out very good.
Yeah.
Instead of stopping at every house.
Yeah.
There's also some special accommodations for your preschool students, like some of them need car seats or seat belts or those types of things that aren't necessarily on a typical bus. And, it's not always feasible just for them to ride some of your older, like 4-year-old preschoolers, it's probably would be somewhat appropriate, but you have to think, like, the oldest kids on those bus are 6th graders, could be running at like 12, 13 years old with a 3-year-old. It kind of makes.
Yeah, I just didn't know if for some students that
Yeah.
might be a easy way than having, that's on the way outlier or something like that. So.
Item 3, Pershing Elementary discussion.
Okay, this one is a little bit more complex or complicated, but we figured we might go ahead and bring up the conversation and see where it goes. So Pershing is another school that could feed into Eugene Field, and if that was the case, then we would need some of the staffing at Pershing to follow that. It's kind of twofold, the Pershing conversation is, or if 6 through 8 is going to be the model for middle school moving forward, why not go ahead and move the 6th grade out of Pershing into Rubidoux? We have space to do that right now, and so I'll let Bethany kind of touch base on that.
So again, looking at those northern side schools, and there's some room there. There's not as much room at Pershing as people think. It's really it's understaffed by about 20 students, but it does reduce the class sizes considerably. And when you look at Lindbergh, all of the students at Pershing feed into Rubidoux and then Lafayette. And then when you look at Lindbergh, they are very full and have lots of students. So to relieve some pressure off Lindbergh, we looked at moving kids to Pershing. One of the kind of the key things that I was looking at is to how to create more space at Pershing where we could house more students there. And part of that would be to move those 43 students that are 6th graders out of Pershing to Rubidoux where there is space. And creating that another K-5 building, similar to what Hyde looks like in the south end. It's kind of a direct feeder to Spring Garden and Benton, and it is a K-5 building. Doing that, we could then move about 48 students out of Lindbergh and place them into Pershing. It would open up enough room without too much of a significant impact. 2nd grade is the only area that would be concerning to me at 28, and that's probably an area in which I would add another teacher. I would make it 3 sections there. 28 at a 4th or 5th or 6th grade level doesn't concern me as much, but 28 in 2nd grade, when you're putting the finishing touches on reading, I like to keep those numbers a little bit smaller. It was a little bit harder when looking at Pershing because Pershing's boundary does go almost all the way to 29 in the Missouri River. So when I looked at it, I dipped in. There's also several places in here where some students overlap. There are some kids that go to Lindbergh that should be going to Pershing and some kids that go to Pershing that should be going to Lindbergh, which I found that a little bit odd. And I didn't dig super deep. But if I went with, and I'm going to have to read this, Hampton Road, which is right here to Green Street, and then I just drew a line straight across. There's not a good boundary road there because there is no road that goes all the way across. So I just went as the crows flew on part of it and moved all of the kids north. So I essentially just took that Pershing boundary and just moved it a little bit farther south towards into the Lindbergh range to come with those 48 students. The impact to the 6th graders moving to Ruby Doo, they would already go to Ruby Doo as 7th graders. This would give them another year of middle school to become accustomed to that. And it was the model from Vision Forward. But as you can see, it would lower some class sizes at Lindbergh, kind of taking some pressure off of them, and really just creating class sizes of equitable size at Pershing.
How far is Green Street from Lindbergh? It's
Right by
not,
Dairy
those
Queen.
kids aren't walking.
Right by Dairy Queen.
So those kids are walkers to Lindbergh now?
I don't know, I didn't.
Because that would be my big thing if I was that parent and my
That's a good
kids had to
question.
walk to Lindbergh for X number, I'd be quite upset.
I know they walk the Dairy Queen, which is Green Street,
Right.
every once in a while.
Well, yeah.
For
Well,
PE
my Riverview
class.
kids did too, so.
I've done it before.
But I mean,
when
if
was
they
in
were
school,
already
but-
walkers going to Lindbergh, that would be hard for me as a parent to say, okay, now you're going on a bus anymore. I don't know.
That's a good.
2 cents, I mean,
That's a good point.
I know it creates some issues with feeder patterns and things like that, but there are some neighborhoods that are much closer to Pershing that are not Pershing
oh. Wow.
currently.
Yeah.
I guess I would question why did we look at that as well? Why wouldn't we just go, when we say go south a little bit, why wouldn't we go like south of Cook Road and consume some of that, which I think
South
maybe
of
is
Cook Road.
It's field, so what
Oh,
we,
that's a good
I mean, like, you could look at, I mean, there are lots of things to do there. Like, you could look at pulling out a field, but field is already, like, there's 100 empty seats at field right now. So pulling kids from field to go to Pershing,
Yeah, just
it doesn't necessarily.
East side of Lindbergh over.
every one of these kids in the proposed area live closer to Field than Pershing too. So one of my concerns on this is, are we actually, it's like 2 miles versus 1.4 or something like that. My concern with this is, are we just trying to fix and patch up a broken system, or should we just overhaul it? And I know nobody wants to touch it, but in the past, but I guess I just think we would be better off to stand from a moral high ground to do the right thing, the ethical thing, put students first, put a plan out there, and then challenge the community to tell them they need to give a good reason of why they can't send their kids to school with my kids. And then, if there's something wrong with our schools, challenge the board and administration to fix it to where there's no argument why this school is better than that school. Maybe, I think it's mostly just image and what it is. And then we need to challenge a lot of people in this town to tell us why it's more important for them to set this false narrative to where they can profit more, and why their profit is more important than what's right for kids. Because that's it. We've tried to create this segregated little, if you really care about your kids, you send them to this school, or you send them to this school, and then they go to here. One, we need to get rid of that misconception, and that's our job. And if there is differences, we need to get rid of that as well. And if we do what's right, we have something to argue. And I would challenge the people, why is the education that I believe in for my kids, why is that not good enough for somebody else's kids? And again, and why is your profit more important than what's fair for these kids? And I think that's what needs to come out, and that I'll probably have a bunch of death threats tonight, or job targets, or whatever, but that's what needs to happen. I've had job targets on that issue before, so let's just keep them coming.
You two mentioned about the neighborhoods. Can you tell us the names of these neighborhoods?
Well, I was referring to, as an example, Cook Road. There's a Haverhill that is north of Cook Road that goes to Pershing. There's a Haverhill that is south of Cook Road that goes to Field.
Yep. They go to Field.
Yep. And it is very, very close to Pershing. It's across the street from Rubidoux, but those kids are bused to Field and Bowdoin. And I'm not trying to make anybody mad either. I'm just questioning if we're willing to tell Lindbergh families miles away from Pershing, your kid's now going to get on a bus and go to Pershing. I mean, I know a lot of those people. I want to be able to explain to them why that makes more sense than looking at someone on the other side of Cook Road that is not walking distance, but almost walking distance to Pershing.
Yeah.
Why those kids aren't going to Pershing.
There was a study
and
done recently, and it didn't produce the results that a lot of people liked, so it kind of got tabled on what the elementary boundary should be.
Yeah, and that was a demographic study in 2019. As you guys know, we went through that, and Preston took a hard stand as this is what the boundaries should be, and the board chose not to
And I think
go down that route.
So, full disclosure, I rag on Field a lot because I'm a Field parent, so I feel like I can. But I think what you're saying too is how can you say these kids, like, Field deserves a small boundary and a community-based schools, but you don't. I don't want to rag on, I don't want to say that, but, I'm saying that.
You're right. I'm
But
not either. I'm just
I just think
questioning.
that the decisions that have been made have been highly political.
Yep.
That, it's okay to piss off Field, or it's okay to piss off, shouldn't say that. It's okay to upset, said it twice. It's okay to upset Lindbergh parents, but we don't want to mess with Field parents because they'll get riled up and they'll call their state rep or whatever. And so it just perpetuates this inequity.
Yeah. And I agree, that's the reason why we wanted to have that discussion. We figured, honestly, from an administrative standpoint, that this would be part of the next discussion. I think it really does need to be. As you mentioned, we have to fix it and fix it right. And if we fix it and fix it right, the Pershing thing is probably part of the next conversation with the boundaries and the feeder patterns in the middle school.
So we're patching a patch of a patch of a patch.
Right.
One other question that I think, and it'd be good, when I went to the Vision 4 meetings, the 6 through 8 model, I don't know how much the 6 through 8 model has been accepted because it's the best thing or because it's just a model, we need it all to be the same. So the reason that we have 6 through 8 into middle schools is because we didn't want to touch the elementary issue. And it was easier to put poor kids in middle schools than it was to rearrange, better off families into different elementary schools. And the question I have is, what are we gaining in the 6 through 8 model versus the 7 and 8 model? How are the attendance, the performance, the discipline of the 6 through 8? Yeah, I know 6th graders are too big for elementary school and they're maybe too much of a pain for middle school. There's a lot of issues, but which one offers the most value? And it needs to be a discussion because here we're packed at this level and we've got plenty of room at this level. And if there's really not much value in that 6 through 8 model besides just kind of looks good, and if you ask 6th grade parents at Field, at Oak Grove, at Skaith, and at Pershing, I didn't want my 6th grader going to that middle school model. And I would have happily taken my 6th grader and went to a private school over that model in the middle school. And maybe it's better now, I don't know, but that was just me personally. I think we need to really look into the details of what is a 6th grade, and we need to think like kids and think like the parents, not like middle-aged professional adults with advanced degrees. What's best for those kids at that level? is there has to be, for us to go against what we have available, which is a lot of space, there has to be a great advantage of the 6th through 8 model. And I haven't seen it yet. Please educate me.
So I think we've already graduated to item number 4, which is a long-range plan.
Yeah.
So you're suggesting instead of just addressing this boundary issue because of Mark Twain, that we take a deeper dive
Yeah.
and do it once and for all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
North End needs to
That's
be
the
done.
goal. If we did the early childhood and messed this up, we're gonna fix it. Flat out, one time, here's the goal, here's the boundaries. They're all the same, equity's the same across the board.
Okay. All right, so let's fast forward to that piece then. What the plan is, I'm actually meeting with Eileen and Kendra tomorrow, and administratively, we talked about this and felt like we have information from DLR from 2019. We have information from a demographer in 2019. I think we can take that information and we can mesh that information with the Vision Forward plan. You know, what the community asked for from a Vision Forward standpoint. You put those two things together, then not a whole lot has changed since 2019. I don't necessarily think that it's in our best interest to go ask them to give us another 5-year plan. I think we can take it, we can put it together. We plan on meeting for 6 hours on March the 6th, and we're going to get in a room and break up and kind of talk about how we can put this thing together. And so what we would like to do is, so we don't stop the progress, we understand that the Pershing conversation is kind of dead in the water today, which we figured that's probably the case, and that's okay. We just wanted to bring it up because it's been brought up before. So we didn't want to look like we were trying to dodge something. We felt like it was probably best to go that route too, but we wanted it to be out there. So with that being said, you put those things together, we'll bring that back to you with the 5-year plan so we can start having those discussions about the boundaries, about the feeder programs, about the middle school. Because I really think if you choose 6 to 8, then you're really going to have to talk about a facility.
Yep.
If you choose 7 to 8, you're not going to have to worry about a facility. So those conversations need to start and they need to take place. And so let us put something together from an administrative standpoint, a document that you guys can look at, pick apart, and go from there. Because it becomes bigger than what we can do today.
Becomes a bond issue versus no bond issue.
No, not necessarily.
Well, I mean,
What we have-
for a new middle school.
Well, but
Yeah.
you could,
No tax
for the bonding we have now, you could add on to the 3 middle school.
Yeah, no tax
and-
increase.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
not do anything. I mean, there's available funding there for something of that nature versus trying to build whole new facilities. or
Yeah,
whatever.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so those are the discussions that need to
Right.
take place.
Okay.
So let me rewind here and kind of talk about the agenda in itself. So the only thing that will be on the board agenda for next Monday, the 27th, will be the Mark Twain repurpose. So the first information item that we talked about. That's the only thing that'll be on. And what the board will do is they'll approve or disapprove what we presented today, along with the impact analysis that Mr. Foster alluded to in the beginning. So let me back up by saying the reason why that information was presented. I was in violation of policy FC. I'll just be honest with you. It was overlooked, and for that, I apologize. I'll take it. And so we consulted the attorney to ask them, what route we needed to go, and I felt like it was best that we make it right, so we made it right. And so what the board we tried to make it right. So what the board will do is approve that and the Mark Twain repurpose at the same time, just so we have everything there. I didn't want anything to look like we were trying to hide something or anything along those lines. So.
Any questions or comments about any of the agenda items that we've gone over?
I do have. President Day.
Yes, Mr. Reader. Sorry.
No, I just really appreciate what Mr. Leak has to say, because I want to go overboard on the empathy towards these, every person that's affected from Mark Twain on this. And the flexibility, and it's something nobody's talked about, but at some point with all that, particularly that, we're going to have to allow a few exceptions. And, I mean, I can just remember all different kinds of things where somebody, the way we divide up the boundaries where, and if you've been at Mark Twain 4th, 5th, or 6th grade, I'm sorry, I can remember back to those days and being totally, at that age, how it could affect you negatively or positively. And how we did Humboldt and all that was criminal, how we treated that whole change. And why nobody cured is, again, mainly because it's on the other side of town. So that's why it's made it easy. But on this situation, we can go overboard. These things that Mr. Leaks brought to our attention, the draft situation, make a big deal about it all the way until the end of school. And if there are exceptions for some reason, because the mother-in-law goes to work and the kids are being transitioned and they ended up in this divide going to 2 different elementaries, for the next 2 or 3 years, we need to let people know. I agree with what Mr. Leak also said to me earlier, that most of the people are just going to go ahead and go with it. But if there are exceptions, so say half of them go with it. That leaves us 150 to pay total attention to make sure that transition is not traumatic in any way, shape, or form. Mr. Leak has indicated to me that that Humboldt and when Lake closed, those kids were affected throughout the rest of their school year and still school career here and still are, because the way it was done. And so I don't want that at all on this. And the second thing I'd say to all those parents, how we're going to bend over backwards, and to the kids mainly to the students, is that the good news about this, though, is that Mark Twain is still going to exist. And who is going to benefit the most? All those schools right up in this area. Those kids are the most vulnerable, and taking them off that bus clear to Lake Contrary and back. And we're going to double our capacity for early childhood, and we've still got a wait list twice that long. So I want to get past the, make sure that however we do it, okay, but I think that having these conversations, the teachers, I'm asking the teachers on this transition for all these kids up and down, let's go overboard about it. That we've done it right. We've paid attention to it. Okay, because it does have long-term effects for us. And it also has long-term effects for how everybody perceives us. So, we go overboard about it. Anyhow, thanks for the time on this, and all you guys coming to this too. So,
Yeah, I appreciate those comments, Mr. Reader, and I wish we could have videoed the conversation that we had with the teachers on that day, because that's really exactly everything that you're talking about right now is exactly what was brought to our attention. So
I think that
they live it every day, right?
And I think the community of those affected would be a little bit more at ease if they could see those conversations as well. Because I've reached out to a lot of people affected, and they're kind of in the dark. They're in the dark right now. So I can't speak for them all, but I know that if they see that their issue is getting attention, and they could watch that, or something, and maybe just watching this, knowing that we're talking about it, I think that would mean a lot to a lot of those people.
Yeah. That's why I was thinking maybe a committee, I know we got a lot of committees, but maybe just an ad hoc committee just to further the conversation. Not to take away from maybe a designated employee that can address the issue, or like a point person perhaps. Personally, I think it's a good idea.
What's your timeline for wanting to have a long-term plan in place?
Fast. We'll see how much we can get done. I mean, it's there, right? We just have to figure out what parts of it we want to use and what parts we don't want to use. We hope to have a pretty good rough draft for you at the next facility meeting. I don't want to stop progress, okay? Maybe I do need to get out of the left lane a little bit, but we're making strides. I think we're doing what's best for kids, and I don't want to see us stop completely. So,
From an analogy standpoint, we've been on a dirt road for like the last 20 years, so I mean, being in the left lane is not necessarily a bad idea.
Well, these are decisions that should have been made years ago,
Yes,
but nobody
100%.
wanted to be unpopular and be
Yeah.
disliked, which is understandable, but every day that this goes on, you're sacrificing staff and you're sacrificing student learning. So
Yep.
fix it, be the villain, be the hero, whatever, but fix it.
and it'll be a conversation that we'll have to, this is not something that we can talk about at the next meeting and, okay, here we go, right? It's a big task. Just the next step is a big task with the boundaries of feeder programs, your middle school model. But it does all go together. I mean, you can't argue that.
And I guess that's maybe what I'm thinking. As much as we want to have like static boundaries and next year to be the final, if you're not sure exactly what middle school model or what the future of all the elementary schools look like, you might have to be a little more flexible on that than you just.
Yeah, and I think that in what model you choose drives that, because you'll have to ask the voters in April of '24 if it involves 6 to 8. I don't think there's any way you can not. No tax increase.
Can you elaborate on what we're voting on in the upcoming board meeting? with
The only
board?
thing you're voting on is the item number 1 on the agenda today,
Which is
the Mark Twain repurpose.
how many schools are going to receive the kids?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
And we're going to do that without the boundary, without setting the.
with the boundaries at the same, with the boundaries for Mark Twain,
Okay.
but without the boundaries of the entire district. Yeah. So the boundaries that are going to be affected will be Parkway, Carden Park, Skaith, Edison, and Coleman, and then Mark Twain. That's what you'll be voting on Monday night.
Okay, but we're talking about repurposing, or not repurposing, but stabilizing a new boundary line. So we're going to vote on something, and we're going to say, this is what we're going to do. These are the kids that are going to go to this school, but we're not going to, or then we're going to dismantle that and create new boundary lines?
No. The ones that you choose to vote on for the repurpose of Mark Twain need to stay in place whenever you talk about the boundaries for the entire district. Am I not following you properly?
I think, so this Pershing Lindbergh boundary
Right.
is set aside and it's,
Right.
and it's
Right.
not part of what you've done
Not at all.
to address
So
Coleman district.
whenever we do it. for
That's
the
why
whole
we tried to
district-
put them in 3 different.
Okay, I think so.
So whenever we do it for the whole district, those boundaries stay the same? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
I think, right?
Well, I think it's important. I said that at the very beginning. You got to make sure that these students aren't affected twice.
Yeah.
So you don't want a student going from Mark Twain to Coleman in 23, 24, and then turn around and make them go to Skaith in 24, 25. That can't happen.
So these are two proposals that you just think might help with,
Yeah.
with the change
Yeah.
that already is going to
Yeah.
happen with
Okay,
Mark Twain.
yeah. That's what I wanted to make sure.
Okay.
Okay. We do appreciate everyone for coming out. Good
Hey,
discussion.
David, real quick.
Hold up, there's one more item on there.
What would that be?
Open discussion.
I thought that's what we were
I
doing.
think a couple people in the audience had a couple questions.
Plan overall so that we don't have to change boundaries again? Because a lot of those schools you're talking about go to 2 and 3 different
Middle schools?
middle schools now.
Yeah. I think that's why the middle school model has to be part of that next discussion.
But if you don't let them change again, they're still all 3 going to go to 3 different schools in the same
No.
elementary school.
No,
They do now. How's that going to be different?
well, that's when you change the boundaries, that's what you change. The boundaries of the middle schools.
Yeah, if you're not gonna affect the Mark Twain kids twice. Like, my kid would go to Skaith, so I'm driving past Parkway and Pickett to get to Skaith. But if you're not gonna affect them twice, they might not, I feel like if you redistrict it, they might be put in a different district. I'm driving past 2 elementary schools to take them to school.
Yeah.
those positions that you're putting them, that needs to be.
But you're saying they're
Yeah,
not gonna
I
get
get that.
affected twice. They need to get affected twice. I'm driving past 2 elementary schools to get to an elementary school.
Okay?
I don't think you can put if you're gonna do it the right way.
I see where you're saying you don't
Yeah,
want
no,
to
I,
be affected
yeah,
twice.
I appreciate that, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I'm driving past 2 schools to get to a school.
Exactly. And I think that's what my question was, is we're going to vote on this, and we're going to say, this is what we're going to do. These are the kids that are going to go to this school and that school for the upcoming school year. And then we're going to talk about also making new boundary lines. But keep the ones that we're already voted on.
Well, I think you just have to be cognizant of the ones that were changed now, as you move forward. I mean, if it makes sense, it makes sense. But you have to be cognizant of that.
But there's gonna be lots of times
Yeah.
it isn't gonna make any kind of sense, like,
I think we're past that. We kind of messed up everything right now, but if we're just going to start over, let's start over.
Because if we put a situation in where these 5 schools won't be touched if we redraw everything, then that really limits being able to do everything correctly.
But we're going to
So-
do it, let's do it
Yeah.
for everybody.
And that's why I'm saying, I don't know if it's the best thing, and I know you don't want to halt anything, but I don't know if it's the best thing to vote on this without having the other discussion.
Maybe it's too soon.
Or maybe, is it possible for the board to vote on, yes, we're gonna repurpose the school for this process, and then we're gonna develop the boundaries when we say, yes, we're going to actually do this part? You know what I mean? So it's like a 2-step process instead of.
Yeah, but how do you,
not even a plan if there's. no
how do you
boundaries.
have,
Right, that's. the-
how do you figure out where you put students for 23, 24?
Why, I don't understand why this lady would have to drive by 2 schools. Is that something we force on her? Because we read
Have
boundaries
you
or
looked at the
whatever?
boundary lines? I mean,
Have you looked at it?
kids that
No,
live
I'm
on
asking, I don't know. I mean,
Brookdale and Masseny
Have you looked?
already attend SCAIF, and that makes no sense.
Yeah.
A lot of it doesn't make sense.
I don't want my kids riding a bus, so I will take them to school. But if I take them to school, I will drive past Parkway and Pickett to take them to school.
Well, I think part of it is that the boundaries were contiguous with all these schools that you're moving them into. So the streets don't necessarily align with that. You're driving the way the traffic flows to get to a school. But where the boundaries are touching each other at different parts of town, it's not ideal. I mean, if we created all new elementary schools for the town, obviously we'd create the boundaries different. We've just had the boundaries based on where the schools were built and then have adjusted over time. I think you're just having to work with the best of what you have.
What would happen if we had no boundaries? What would happen if we just let everybody go wherever they want?
Anarchy.
We don't provide the buses. No, the buses are for set routes, and they do them fine, but if we don't have
It's a
boundaries with
valid
them.
question, because if it overloads certain buildings, we need to focus on why.
Why would people go to?
Yeah, that's what happens.
Why would they?
I mean, because if it does overload and then in summer, nobody wants to go there, boy, we got an issue we need to address. But they're just throwing out for discussion, but.
Because I mean, in all honesty, kids leaving out of this school should be going over to Pickett, not over to SCAIF, if they're going to be going over to any school.
So they could
Right,
go
but we were willing to move other kids out of Coleman and move them over to Field. That's okay. And those are all the wealthy kids, let's just say it out loud. That neighborhood is the wealthier kids that you're moving over to Field, just to be quite honest. Yeah.
I think really the best thing you can do is, I know that's what you want to do, but develop that long-range plan that's going to make everything else
That's what I
fall into place.
I think you make
I
more people happy.
I don't want to get into the demographics of everybody's neighborhood and
Yeah.
who makes what, because I come from a low-income family, but my neighbors make buku bucks. Like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care. But my kids live 1.7 miles from Parkway, and somehow we're gonna go to SCAIF. So, I mean, it would just be so much easier to just start from scratch and just draw up some new lines. I know that sounds super easy to say, but I know neighborhood schools are like dying, but I have to drive past 2 schools to take my kids to school.
Well, that'd be a way to
That's silly.
protect them. That would make them neighborhood
That would make them neighborhood schools if we did
People
it
really
right.
like neighborhood schools
Yeah.
too.
I loved that. I loved being able to walk my kids to school.
How much time do you think we have as far as, when do you think decision should be made?
Yesterday.
Yeah, as fast as possible. Yeah.
But do you feel like the boundaries that you put with Mark Twain and where they're putting kids, do you think that, because it's really kind of that middle core spot, do you think that's going to change? I mean, it's right in the middle.
I really wouldn't think a lot of it. I mean, there are some, Scaife,
Like any other changes are going to be outside of that.
you can't see, but Mark Twain's right here, like Scaife butts all the way up to Mark Twain, and Pickett doesn't. It's down here, and Parkway's here. Like I took this part to go to Scaife, so I didn't. And maybe it's just I don't know, the way you drive, but like I wouldn't probably have driven past Parkway from the kids I put there, but it's just me. And then Coleman's here and it cuts off this little bit, and then Edison takes the rest, which is right there. I couldn't see a huge impact. In the elementary world, our population is really centered on those interior midtown schools and a lot of South End. That's where the chunk of our kids are. There aren't very many kids up in the north, and so our boundaries in our northern schools dip really far south, which then kind of shifts everything. So our neighborhood schools are not, the school isn't necessarily the center.
I wonder for the new preschool. Right now, the boundary for the AM and PM classes, Miss Saney. So next year, if Mark Twain is the preschool, are you telling me that if I live where I do now on Lafayette, I might have to go to the Lake Contrary one?
Yeah.
Even though I live a block from the Mark Twain preschool?
No, that's not the case.
I don't know.
They'll change.
That.
It wasn't thought.
So I would say if we go with these boundaries, we just leave the opportunity for them to change, and they may just have to change.
But to minimize the impact as much as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as you're aware that, hey, we moved these 40 kids already, let's try not to move them again if we can, Right.
Just keep it in
Now,
mind.
Absolutely.
Now, the other 300 that we didn't touch that are in this school, maybe the edge of this boundary is going to change and they're going to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
But that's okay. I mean,
As we look at the boundaries, we just have to be cognitive of just having lots of common sense. In all honesty, more than anything, I mean, it isn't about, I live over here, only I want my kid over here. No, we just gotta make all this make sense.
Well,
Yeah.
I know the realtors are going to start.
Have that line where it cuts, like, across the street.
Right.
It's got, the line's gotta stop somewhere. But where does it make sense where I can see a school where my kids go?
2 schools away.
Yeah.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense.
Well, we already do that at Rubidoux, so you can stand across the street at Rubidoux and go to Bodie.
right.
Nettiest thing ever.
Maybe we can change all that.
Diallo, back to her question in regards to early learning. We haven't set that line yet, right?
No, we have a 10-10 line.
Okay. And is it Massany again?
No.
Yeah, I didn't think so. Just wanted to make sure. What is it?
36 highway.
Okay.
Just another thing I don't mind putting on the table here before we leave, about if we want to do it right, one and done, as everybody seems to indicate in this thing, we also need to bring forward that underlying conversation about the closure of schools or another school. So if we need to go ahead and instigate that conversation right before we decide on redoing the boundaries one and done, and doing them right the first time, so.
One and done,
point,
how
Kenny.
long does that take, though? I mean, do we have time?
It doesn't have to be district-wide though, right?
Well, you can
Give me a
five-year
pencil and a
plan.
weekend and I could probably get it done.
Well, but, I
I've
mean,
been fighting this argument for long enough. Pull out that study that's already been done for us, and it's just a little bit of, it's really just a little bit of adjusting.
But you don't have to do high school, middle school, elementary for next year.
No.
But you can do just the elementary and fix it once and for all, and then, or not for all, but for now, and then move on. But you have to be cognizant of this plan affects this one,
Yeah.
and it affects this one, and
Yeah.
that's fine. That's
And
not
and
a-
obviously, high school even makes it's even more convoluted
Right.
because of open enrollment.
Right.
But the reason we have open enrollment is because of
because
our
of-
boundaries were so
Right.
terrible
Right.
that if we had closed enrollment, we could probably be open to a lawsuit.
And the reason we have those boundaries is because those guys making money in this town.
It's almost like if you give a
The
mouse a cookie.
realtors and the house builders, who even threatened our superintendent at a Mustangs game this year.
Okay.
I'm ready to go.
My suggestion is that we leave it on the table, the board votes for it or they don't, and then we just leave the disclaimer of, we might just have to change the boundaries. I think the boundaries as a district is gonna be more of a long-term plan, and we have to address that over the next several weeks and maybe several months. And as we can see, there's gonna be a lot more conversation behind that.
It was good conversation, though.
But good discussion.
I think it was.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
You know, the time is now 3:15. We do appreciate everyone for coming out, and at this point, the meeting will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's bring snacks.